All right. Anarchists, despite the force and unquestionably positive character of anarchist ideas, despite the clarity and completeness of anarchist positions with regard to the social revolution, and despite the heroism and countless sacrifices of anarchists in the struggle for anarchist communism, it is very telling that in spite of all this, the anarchist movement has always remained weak and has most often featured in the history of working class struggles, not as a determining factor, but rather as a fringe phenomenon. So begins the introduction to the organizational platform for the General Union of Anarchists. Perhaps this is not the most inspiring introduction, but it spells out the motivation for the authoring of the pamphlet. The organizational platform for the General Union of Anarchists is the founding text of a movement within anarchism called Platformism. It was released in 1926 by a group called Dielo Truda, which translates from Russian into workers' cause. Dielo Truda operated out of Paris and was made up of Russian anarchists who were in exile. Notable among them was Nestor Makhno, previously the commander of the Peasant Revolutionary Insurrectionary Army of Ukraine, the RIAU, which engaged in guerrilla warfare during the Russian Civil War. Makhno and his army managed for a time to establish a Ukrainian free territory organized under the principles of anarchism as set forth by Peter Kropotkin, with economics organized around the free exchange between rural and urban areas, supporting what they called free worker-peasant Soviets, and guaranteeing freedom of speech, press, assembly, and the like. Makhno's army at times fought alongside the Red Army, and at other times there was fierce antagonism between the two. Together, the RIAU and the Red Army managed to halt the advance of Pyotr Wrangel's White Army in Ukraine, and eventually defeat him altogether in 1920. Immediately thereafter, citing allegations that free Ukraine was a warlord state, the Bolsheviks ordered that the RIAU be disbanded and that its leaders be arrested and executed. Makhno managed to escape this fate, but was pursued by the Red Army, causing him to flee into Romania and eventually into France. Prior to Makhno's defeat, it is arguable that the anarchist movement was stronger in Russia than anywhere else in Europe. The leading proponents of anarchism, Mikhail Bakunin, Peter Kropotkin, Leo Tolstoy, and even Emma Goldman, were all Russian-born. Numerous anarchist communes existed in Russia, some of them following the Christian pacifist teachings of Leo Tolstoy, such as the Life and Labor Commune, which was a pacifist and vegetarian commune near Moscow, which was liquidated by the Bolshevik government and its members relocated to Siberia. After the defeat of the anarchist movement in Russia, certain anarchists began to ask themselves why their goals had failed to be realized. The common dismissal is to say that we would have been successful if only the Bolsheviks hadn't undermined us in the process. This answer may have been sufficient to many anarchists, but it was not for Makhno or the Dielo Truda group. As Dielo Truda wrote in their letter to Malatesta, we have taken the habit of attributing the defeat of the anarchist movement of 1917 through 1919 in Russia to the Tsarist repression of the Bolshevik Party. This is a big mistake. The Bolshevik repression impeded the extension of the anarchist movement during the revolution, but it wasn't the only obstacle. It's rather an internal impotence of the movement itself, which was one of the principal causes of defeat. An impotence proceeding from the vagueness and indecision which characterized different political affirmations concerning organization and tactics. In drafting the organizational platform, Dielo Truda sought to rectify the state of affairs by clearly laying out what anarchist organization should look like, in a pragmatic and non-utopian manner. The underlying current of which was that anarchists should form themselves into one large union which is explicitly anarchist and which had a clear and unified program with regard to ideology and tactics. To do this, they proposed that the general union should be explicitly and solely anarchist communist, and therefore the class struggle should be the most important facet of the anarchist idea. The organizational platform begins by stating that there is no single humanity. There is only humanity made up of classes, slaves, and masters. And that in social terms, the whole of human history represents a continuous chain of struggles waged by the working class in pursuit of their rights, freedom, and a better life. At all times throughout the history of human societies, this class struggle has been the principal factor determining the form and structure of those societies. They make this aspect of their thought even more prominent by rejecting the idea of anarchism as a humanitarian philosophy. They felt that to credit anarchism with a general humanitarian character would be false and would inevitably result in the justification of the current order. Anarchism, they felt, was an ideology of the working masses to the exclusion of the non-laboring classes, and that the extent to which the non-laboring classes persist in a post-revolutionary society, the anarchist communist society would recognize no responsibility towards them, unless, of course, they decide to become productive and join that society. This is in contrast with the anarchist synthesis ideas of Volin and Sebastian Foix, who believed that Anarcho-Syndicalism, libertarian communism, and individualist anarchism should be blended to work alongside one another. Volin, also a Russian anarchist living in exile in France at the time, demanded a model of organization in which unionism is considered the method of social evolution, libertarian communism constitutes the organization of the new society, and individualism becomes the goal of post-revolutionary society, aiming at the emancipation and happiness of the individual. In his criticism of the platform, he stated that to maintain that anarchism is only a theory of classes is to limit it to a single viewpoint. The platformists came out vehemently against this kind of synthesis, particularly of the incorporation of individualists, whom they felt, with an eye to personal pleasure, cling stubbornly to the chaotic condition of the anarchist movement, and therefore hold it back from ever becoming a viable revolutionary movement. And that therefore we reject as theoretically and practically unfounded the idea of creating an organization using the recipe of the synthesis, that is to say, bringing together the supporters of various strands of anarchism. Such an organization embracing a potpourri of elements in terms of their theory and practice would be nothing more than mechanical assemblages of persons with varying views on all issues affecting the anarchist movement, and would inevitably break up on encountering reality. The platformists uphold the necessity of a violent social revolution and the immediate abolition of the state, while agreeing with the Marxists that the state is the organized violence of the bourgeoisie against the workers. They disregard that this could be a tool in the hands of the proletariat, asserting that state power always goes hand in hand with exploitation and enslavement of the masses, and that it nurtures in the masses the slavish mentality of submission, expectation, and a belief in rulers and bosses. The platformists state that attempts to distinguish between anarcho-syndicalism and anarchist communism are silly. Anarcho-syndicalism could, for them, be understood as a tactic employed by anarchist communists to enter the radical labor unions while also being answerable to the general union of anarchists, which would be the explicitly anarchist political organization, which would provide guidance to the syndicalist unions, in this way preventing the movement from degenerating into mere trade unionism, pitting members of one union against another. The fundamental precepts of platformism can be summed up in the following fashion. 1, the recognition of the class struggle as a fundamental facet of anarchism. 2, that anarchist communism is the basis of this movement. 3, syndicalism is the primary method of the struggle. 4, that a general union of anarchists is needed based on tactical unity and ideological unity. And 5, that a positive program is needed to realize the social revolution. This brings us to the next aspect of the platform, in which they attempt to address the problems confronting the social revolution on day one, which are production, consumption, the Agrarian Question, and the defense of the revolution. With regard to the revolution, they state, the country's productive machinery is a whole and belongs to the entire working class. This determines the character and form of the new system of production. It too is to be a united whole, common in the sense that the products manufactured by the producers will belong to everybody. These products, or of whatever type they may be, will represent the general supply fund for the workers, from which every participant in the new system of production will receive everything that they may need, on an equal footing with everyone else. To accomplish this, they propose the creation of specially created agencies, purpose-built by the working masses, workers' councils, workplace committees, or workers' administrations of factories and plants. These agencies, liaising with one another at the level of municipality, province, and then country, will make up the municipal, provincial, and thereafter general federal institutions for the management and administration of production. Appointed by the masses and continually subject to their supervision and control, These bodies are to be constantly renewed, thereby achieving the idea of genuine self-management of the masses. With regard to consumption, they state that the problem will undoubtedly arise early on that the towns will have a shortage of basic essentials and that the peasants will have an overabundance of that produce. To rectify this problem, they propose the close cooperation between these two classes of workers. In order to establish this cooperation, the urban working class, having assumed control of production, must immediately consider the basic needs of those in the countryside and endeavor to supply them with everyday consumer goods, as well as the means and instruments for collective cultivation of the land. Gestures of solidarity from the urban workers in fulfilling the needs of the peasants will elicit a like response, and in return, the peasants will collectively supply the towns with the produce of rural production, in particular foodstuffs. This would lead to worker-peasant cooperatives who will be the primary organs for satisfying the needs of town and countryside. The Agrarian Question is of particular importance to the Russian anarchists, who come from a country where the rural peasantry made up 85% of the whole population. They begin addressing this issue by re-emphasizing that just like the factories, the land belongs to the whole of the working class, not to individual peasants, and cannot be bought or sold. However, they state that the peasantry is accustomed to working the land with individual methods. They state that collective farming is the most ideal form of agricultural production, but given their particular historical circumstances, it might not be immediately feasible. So they state that the ultimate pattern of land tenure and land use will be determined by the revolutionary peasantry itself. Of course, once again, barring the buying, selling, or leasing of land, or the exploitation of one's labor by another. Recognizing the importance of food production, the platform has stressed the importance of intensive propaganda among the peasants on behalf of communist land tenure. With regard to the defense of the revolution, the platformists state that the most critical juncture in the social revolution is not the moment when authority is overthrown, but the time thereafter when the forces of the ousted regime unleash a general offensive against the workers, when the gains that have been achieved must be safeguarded. They advocate an army based on the following basic principles. One, the class nature of the army. Obviously, it needs to be made up of the proletariat and the peasantry. Two, voluntary military service. All coercion is excluded in the manner of the defense of the revolution. Three, revolutionary self-discipline. Voluntary military service and revolutionary self-discipline are mutually complementary in every way and serve to make the revolutionary army psychologically stronger than any state army. And four, total subordination of the revolutionary army to the worker and peasant masses, as represented by the general worker and peasant bodies throughout the land, which will be created by the masses at the moment of revolution and given the task of overseeing the country's economic and social life. They also stress that voluntary service is not meant in the narrow sense of a struggle waged by worker and peasant forces against a local enemy, without coordination in the shape of an overall operational plan, each unit attacking on its own initiative. When they are fully developed, partisan action and tactics in the revolution should be guided by a common military and revolutionary strategy. Like any war, civil war can only be waged successfully by the workers if two principles fundamental to all military activity are observed: unity of operational planning and unity of common command. The most critical time for the revolution will be when the bourgeoisie marches as an organized force against the revolution and will require the workers to have recourse to these principles of military strategy. In the final section of the organizational platform, D.L. Trudeau puts forward its principles of anarchist organization. The first, of course, is unity of theory. Basically, if you want to be in this general organization, you should probably agree with their tenets, class war, all that kind of stuff. Two, unity of tactics, or the collective method of action. So everybody in this should struggle together as an organized force, as opposed to emphasizing individual initiative. And third, collective responsibility. This means that the entire union is responsible for the political action of each member, but each member is also responsible for the activity of the union. Each member should participate in the collective decision-making and also respect the decisions of the collective. And they say that the practice of operating on one's own individual responsibility must be strictly condemned and rejected within the ranks of the anarchist movement. And then the fourth principle is federalism, which basically, federalism, they say, means the free agreement of individuals and entire organizations upon the collective endeavor in order to achieve a common objective. As a result, the federalist type of anarchist organization, while acknowledging the right of every member of the organization to independence, freedom of opinion, personal initiative, and individual liberty, entrusts each member with a specific organizational duties, requiring that these be duly performed and that decisions jointly made must also be put into effect. In order to coordinate the activity of all the union's affiliated organizations, a special body is to be established in the form of an executive committee of the union. And the following tasks would be part of that executive committee. The implementation of decisions made by the union, overseeing the activity and theoretical development of the individual organizations in keeping with the overall theoretical tactical line of the union, and monitoring the general state of the movement and maintaining functional organizational ties between all the member organizations in the union, as well as with other organizations. This executive committee is the subject of a lot of controversy amongst anarchists. Malatesta in particular thought that basically sowed the seeds for it becoming an authoritarian type organization. Anyways, that's it. Any questions?
Maybe one question. You mentioned the idea of some anarchists who emphasize just individual responsibility, don't want to act on their own, not really be part of an organization. Do you see that as, even though this was written, maybe 80, 90 years ago, something like that, do you see that same tendency these days amongst anarchists? Or?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think those ideas are I guess I wasn't alive back then, but they seem even more prominent today with things, like crime think, or especially with the anti-organizational ideas of different insurrectionary anarchists and things like that. I mean, yeah, it's definitely still prevalent today.
Do you have any sense for why maybe that kind of strand of anarchism tends to be a little bit more prominent these days, as opposed to some of the ones that do organized collective action, like class struggle, things like that, as opposed to just maybe lifestyleism or living outside the system and kind of calling it good at that?
As to why that's more prominent today?
Yeah. Not that you need to have an answer necessarily, but I'm curious if you have thoughts on it.
I guess it's more fun that way. It's probably more fun. I don't know. I guess probably the people that are involved in that don't have a real good understanding of class struggle or capitalism. They probably, they've never read any. Well, maybe they've read some Bakunin, maybe they've read some Marx, but it seems like most of them just kind of get their information from like Crime Think or things like that, where they're just yeah, this is really cool. We should all become dropouts. That kind of thing.
It's kind of more bad in a way.
In a sense, yeah. I think. Chris?
This theory seems to lay out pretty extensively what the post-revolutionary society is going to be like. And so one problem is how feasible is that going to be in a post-revolution, but also what is their actual theory towards revolution, the actual praxis of it. I mean, it sort of seems like, oh yeah, they're going to have this voluntary army come up and liberate everybody and then defend the revolution, if it will. Is that the general theory of it? They're sort of relying on that, or is there any sort of building up class struggle to the point of, I guess I won't say seizure of the state, but let's just say smashing the bourgeois state and then pretending
Yeah, I think the main area they touch on that is where they talk about, there's a section there about anarchist communism and anarcho-syndicalism. Basically, they just talk about, first off, forming the organization.
Big anarchist union.
Yeah, big anarchist union. But then they also enter into the existing labor unions in attempt to radicalize them, and which would be, their behavior in that would be generally coordinated by the general anarchist union. Is basically what I see as that. And I guess as that grew, then they could begin forming militias and things like that.
Okay.
That's how I see it.
But then let's go back to the fact that they've sort of laid out what they want their post-revolutionary society to be like. When they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to have these federated systems that are going to bridge the gap between agriculture and all those sorts of things. What happens if, for instance, they have to fight a long drawn-out civil war where most of their factory bases are destroyed and lots of people are corpse piled and can't grow food? Then sort of where do they go from there? I mean, does this sort of have, do they take into account that post-revolutionary society could just be horrifically destroyed, such as it was in Russia and it was in China?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure that they explicitly spell out like what to do when this is when our society is like in shit. They basically just say, okay, these are the fundamental tenets of anarchism, and we're there's going to be things that in the interim that are going to cause that are going to interrupt our creating of a post-revolutionary society, but we should still stick to these basic tenets, right? We should still adhere to these things. There seems to be. I mean, yeah, I guess they don't really get down to the real brass tacks of like what to do in that situation. I mean,
okay. All right. I guess then we'll turn to Machno. You seem to insinuate that they had this sort of what went wrong. I don't know if you ever had a chance to read the article I sent you. The article is called "Tear Them Apart and Be Done with It." The Ottoman leadership of Nestor Makhno's anti-cultural violence. And essentially, when the Tsar abdicates, there's a power vacuum, at least in the countryside, for instance, and Makhno sort of fills this power vacuum by raising up anarchists. But what's really held together by is immense cultural violence. Makhno basically, I mean, he does. I mean, as far as being just out and out bloody, ruthless, and violent, like that's what he was. For instance, he would take enemies. And they would bring them before him, and they'd say, "Oh, I'll tear them apart and be done with it." And they would literally just mutilate these people. There's a story of him burning a priest in a boiler engine, and saying, "Now you'll burn in hell, Father," for all this or whatever. And basically, he favored like this sort of strong, predominant violence, and it sort of thrived off of it. It even tells the story of one time when he had a line of people being captured, and they were being lined up to be executed. One of the guys who's going to be executed kicks the guy who's going to execute him in the stomach, and Makhno's like, "Oh, that's pretty badass. You should join us because you're super violent." So, point being, do you think it's the case that they had some sort of, like, where do you see the failures of the anarchists there, that they had to sort of regroup and re-theorize?
Well, I mean, first off, I have not finished that article. I intend to, but I mean, I've also heard things that are kind of that. Not necessarily contradict those specific anecdotes, but ones that say that he was that a lot of times when he would capture people from other armies, if they were working class, that he would often like let them go and say, "All right, you're a fellow proletariat. We'll set you free," and things like that.
Well, just real quick, do you think he makes that distinction between actual city workers, actual factory, industrial proletariat, or against like agricultural workers? Like peasants.
So you're saying that he probably only did that to the peasantry as opposed to
I'm actually asking you if you know if he does that as a distinction, because he really was not in favor of cities. He thought basically the short proletariat was the people on the countryside.
Yeah, I'm familiar that he wasn't a big fan of the cities. Like for instance, when like he refused to give some food to some people that were trying to like help install like some rail lines, and he just thought he's like, "Oh, that's like a bourgeois, excess, and we don't need that." And that was one of the complaints that the Bolsheviks had against him. As far as like how he treated the rural peasantry versus the urban proletariat, I'm sorry, I can't speak to that. I'm not sure.
I would ask you to finish the article, because they specifically talk about how he led like campaigns on cities, and lots of rape and murder ensued.
Okay.
So.
Well, I mean that may be the case. as he writes about it as the DLO Truder writes about it in this, I mean, it doesn't seem to be the case that they uphold that antagonism between town and country. But,
Okay. What do you see as the movement, the platformism, taking shapes as of today? Like, who's practicing this? Who's making it work?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff in the thing is kind of more historical and applies just to Russia. I mean, when they deal with things like the Agrarian Question and things like that. But as far as how it could be applied today, well, I think first off, there needs to be some sort of labor movement. I mean, that's obvious for any kind of base of any kind of organization. But also that, I mean, I don't know. I guess just like this, you would have to form an organization which was explicitly anarchist. You'd have to start using that as start instituting collective responsibility amongst the members of it, so that you could delegate tasks, get people involved in labor unions and organizing and that sort of thing, which, I mean, seems like it's kind of a general product.
And do you see any movements taking this up today?
Oh, seeing any movements taking this up today? I believe there are a couple organizations that exist today that are explicitly platformist. I don't remember which ones they are, though. I think there's some in England. But anyways, unfortunately, there are a few that exist.
Okay.
Anyone else?
All right, well, let's give Josh a hand.